Hello YouTube, what's up? It's me, Amaxter, back with episode 6 of Behind the Mod. This time we have Reika joining us, and they're the author of ReactorCraft, ChromatiCraft, and many other mods. Hello.
Hello.
So, you're pretty famous in the modding community. Can you tell us how you got started out?
Got started modding.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, this is a long time ago now, but a Christmas break a few years back, I was playing a derivative of Tekken. 1.25 had recently gone out of popularity, and I had fallen in love with Buildcraft at the time, and that meant using Buildcraft engines for literally everything.
Yep.
But one thing I didn't like about it was just the oil collection. I liked the refining into fuel and all that mechanic, but going out and collecting oil, especially when I had to move the pump, every few hours, got really annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, I watched a video on periodic videos, like, hey, in Brazil they're turning sugarcane into ethanol, which is fuel. I'm like, hey, I'm going to do that, right? And so I didn't know Java at the time. I opened up the Buildcraft jar, like, what the hell am I looking at? Linked hash map this and fuel registry that. I'm like, okay, I've got no idea what I'm doing. So I backed out and made a very simple mod where you can make, okay, Nicolite furnace. Yes, this is back in the days when red power was a thing. And, okay, take sugarcane, turn it into oil base, which you right click on the ground like redstone and places an oil block. I never used it because this thing was basically not automatable. But in the process, I ended up learning a bunch of other stuff about, okay, here's how to do tile entities and here's how to do whatever, right? Later on in that same world, I'm like, okay, I need some diamonds for this matter condenser. Yes, this is back again, E2.
I remember those days.
Yeah, and I was too cheap. I still am too cheap to spend iron or diamonds on a pickaxe. But I needed diamonds. And it's like, okay, stone pickaxes. Pickaxes, though, have 132 uses. And that means I was going through pickaxe after pickaxe after pickaxe after pickaxe searching for diamonds. And I'm like, screw this. So I'm like, okay, I want a better pickaxe that's unbreakable. Okay, that means bedrock. But then how am I going to get the bedrock? I can't let you mine it because then you're going to be able to break a hole into the void. Okay, so I need a machine. And so I wrote a bedrock breaker. And I wrote an engine. And I wrote a wire. And then I tried to imitate Buildcraft's power system. And I failed miserably. And, trying and failing for a while, okay, screw this. I gave up. I, played KSP for a month. And then one day, after that, I'm dozing off in a control systems class because the professor can't teach for shit. And well, I have this dream about gearboxes and everything because it was sort of related to the course material. And I'm like, hey, that's what I'm going to do. So I go home that day and I implement a gearbox. I turn the wire into a shaft and I carry, 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1, 16-to-1 gearbox. And I split the engines into, at the time it was all the engines except the hydro and the wind. Those are newer.
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, I'm going to implement torque, speed, and then started implementing all of that and did a lot of research. Okay, this is this kind of engine, it's got this kind of power. And then I, like, okay, this means this needs this kind of fuel. So I need a fermenter to make ethanol because I don't want to do the Buildcraft route of, oil and gasoline. And then, jet fuel was a whole other thing. And it just kind of grew organically from there. And you can already guess what mod I'm talking about.
Right, RotaryCraft.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of an accident, I guess, and it started as, a tools mod, which is funny, because during, I usually criticize those mods for being, forgettable and usually poorly designed.
Mm-hmm, but you kind of, I guess, evolved it from that point.
Yes.
So RotaryCraft is also, I guess, really known for being a very realistic tech mod, and which is kind of increasingly rare these days when we see so many styles of like like late game items or just really powerful items. What was it like to kind of make a much more realistic and I guess down to earth tech mod?
For me, that was easier, honestly, because it meant I didn't have to, quote unquote, be creative. I didn't have to say, okay, how is this going to work and to think up all this. I can just, implement real physical laws or approximations thereof, because, real world, enjoy your differential equations and your computer melting. And so, okay, I basically just, I don't want to say copied, right? But I implemented what I knew, and I do have an engineering background, right? I was an undergrad at the time when I was started doing this. So I had a background in stress analysis and kinematics and all that sort of thing, thermodynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understood how these systems work in the real world to a reasonable degree at least. And like, okay, I can actually implement this, right? And learning Java along the way, helped. But that meant I ended up a system that was reasonably self-consistent because reality is self-consistent, right? And
Right.
so anything that mimics it tended to be as well. And purely by what I think at least is coincidence, but very, very fortuitously, is that it also made it self-balancing. I didn't do this deliberately; it just happened on its own. But what ended up happening is that, okay, if I make this thing and set of things work like the real things do, it ended up being balanced exactly as I wanted it to be. So I could say, okay, turns out you need this realistic-ish, within reason, amount of power or temperature or whatever to make this given thing, and it just so happens to slot exactly into the tech tree where I want it.
Huh.
And I felt like the luckiest person on the planet. I didn't actually have to concern myself, at least at first, with, oh, is this going to be overpowered? Is this going to be underpowered? It just kind of all worked out. There were, of course, things that needed to be refined later on, industrial coils being a particularly glaring example. But that's more from, like, how people ended up playing the mod and certain things having inherent, oh, I want this because it's easier style appeal.
And one that, like stuff like Buildcraft and Industrial Craft, these other, mods and thermal expansion more recently, because of that different approach, what's it been like? What is your view on, I guess, people having mod packs with your mods like RotaryCraft and alongside stuff like thermal expansion?
Well, inherently, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, dropped in straight, there isn't really much appeal for my stuff, just because it is. Sure, the rewards might be much greater, at least in theory, but the costs and effort also are much, much more. And there's almost people like, screw this, I'm going to, use the easy stuff or the stuff I'm familiar with. And that's not surprising and not really bad per se. And so if you just throw them in a pack, yeah, you've made a pretty crappy pack. But you can actually integrate them reasonably well together. And, we have actually done that on my dev server, right, where I did a lot of, recipe changes and number tweaks here all over the place to try to say, okay, RF has a place, and this is especially true in, where you've got simplistic general purpose stuff, extra utilities, Gendustry, all that sort of thing. But then if you want, the advanced, complex, high yield stuff, then you go into the more advanced, machine mods, and it worked out pretty well. What I think though is that it's less that the two styles of mods are incompatible. It's just that more, or let me rephrase that. The kind of base that my mods most appeal to are they're a small minority. I'm not going to guess as numbers, but they're probably less than 10% of the general community. I just said I wouldn't guess a number and guessed a number, but anyway. And they also generally aren't really all that enamored with the more popular mods as design styles. I mean, sure, they'll use it because they like some of the things in those mods, but the design itself doesn't have any particular appeal to them on its own merit. And as a result, what that means is a pack that's designed to appeal to the general population, why bother including my stuff? Because most people in the general population aren't really going to want it. And a pack that's designed to appeal to the kind of people that, like my mods, why bother throwing in a lot of the general stuff? Because it's kind of redundant.
So you kind of, I guess, have this niche or core set of users that you're appealing to.
Yeah, and I've known this since very early on, and I've been fairly vocal on it to sometimes significant retribution.
Yeah, you're very vocal on your aspects of your mod design, historically so, and that's been, I guess, a defining feature of many of your mods. You're unwilling, I guess, to kind of, give in, as like a lot of the community will say, oh, do this, add this.
So, yeah, it's like I'm always go ahead.
So what exactly, I guess, is it like to, I guess, to be the person to put your foot down in the sand and say, no, I'm not doing that?
Well, okay. Personally, it doesn't actually bother or concern me at all to say, okay, this is where I'm gonna, quote unquote, draw the line. Anything else, go ahead and say it, but you're wasting your breath because I'm not going to actually do it. That doesn't have any sort of, quote unquote, impact or draw on me. At least I think I have a fairly coherent and strong idea of what I want the mods to be, right? And of course, again, I'm talking about the big progression-based mods, Rotary ChromatiCraft. I'm not talking about little mods like Geostrata. And though of course others can certainly suggest, ideas, and sometimes even that they're good ideas. But when someone comes forward and is like, here, do this thing, which is clearly a really dumb idea, and if they thought about it for 2 seconds, it'd be obvious. It doesn't bother me at all to say, no, this is bad, and here's why. And, you can continue talking and saying I should do it all you want, but, you're wasting your effort. Yes, it gets annoying afterwards. Oh, no, you're such a horrible person. You're a Nazi, blah, 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 when I don't do it. But, oh well.
Yeah, that's just how it goes, I guess. I mean, if people want to play a different style, I think we had Assy say this on last episode, just play a different mod. But ReactorCraft is not the only mod you develop. You've made lots of other mods, I guess, like Void Monster and Geostrata, that modify more, I guess, base aspects of the game, less technically focused, but nonetheless are still, I guess, have elements of your design in them. So what inspires you to do stuff like that?
The little mods like Geostrata and Void Monster, they're actually just fruition of little ideas that I had at random points, sometimes with other outside inputs. For example, Geostrata was initially, when I was first learning modding, I was learning how to use metadata, right? Block data.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to write a rock mod, right? Where each kind of rock is a different metadata, just because I'm going to learn it. I never made anything with that. I didn't even write textures at the time, right? And I just, shoved it aside and forgot about it. A year and a half later, I'm like, hey, I kind of want to bring that back now. And so I created some textures and it became Geostrata. I added the crystals because they were pretty. A guy in the TeamSpeak at the time suggested, hey, make there be potion effects of the crystals. So I did, and that was Geostrata for a long time. Void Monster, do you remember Atmos from like the Tekkit days?
Yeah,
you
the
go below the
environmental
bedrock,
mod.
you hear like those roaring noises. It sounded kind of like a T-Rex from Jurassic Park or something.
Yeah, it was really creepy.
Yeah, I remember, hearing that, right? And later on in like 1.5, like, hey, I remember that thing from Atmos. I want to bring that back. But this time I'm actually going to implement it as an entity, right? That actually exists in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, some fairly simple code later, and boom, Void Monster and, Ender Crystal model retextured.
So you kind of, I guess, you just had these ideas and you, I guess, just added them to the vanilla game.
Yeah, I just made spin off another little mod. Useful TNT was the same way. Critter Pet was the same way. Cave Control. Some of them are designed to fulfill specific purposes, like Condensed Door is one of the newer ones that was done specifically for our dev server. But for the most part, it's like, hey, I had this cool idea, and it doesn't sound like it'd be a lot of work. I'm going to do it, because why the hell not?
I know, yeah. I mean, I wish we had more people with that attitude in the community. Your other add-ons mods, I guess, for ReactorCraft, like RotaryCraft, or I'm sorry, ReactorCraft and ElectraCraft for RotaryCraft, mods like these, were they kind of inspired by, I guess, other types of power generation seen with other mods?
No. ReactorCraft came to me as like I was bored on the train. I've mentioned before of like having to spend hours on the train because public transit sucks. But anyway, so I was saying there, I want really high power generation for RotaryCraft because it's not really very fun spamming 100 jet engines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this means realistically large scale power plant size things. I could do coal and stuff like that. That's boring. I can't do hydro realistically, not with Minecraft's water physics. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Solar is boring, spammy, overpowered, and generally not very performant. That leaves nuclear. And nuclear it was beautiful because it's very, very powerful. Done right, it's very clean and very safe. Done stupidly, bye-bye world. And so it brought more of that, sort of auto-balancing that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And, I have a bit of a background in understanding like how various kinds of nuclear reactors work in our design, although of course I had to do much more research. And so, a basic fission reactor was the first one I tackled, and like, okay, this is very simple, right? It's a Rankine cycle. And, again, more thermodynamics background I had. Okay, turbines, boilers, and all these other things, right? And, power values, okay, here's the specific heat of water, blah, 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 blah. Later on came breeder reactors, then pebble beds, and then the fusion reactor. That took a while. And then more recently, the thorium reactor, which I put off for longer than I probably should have. ElectraCraft, on the other hand, was designed to fulfill a very specific purpose. I remember this. In V14 of 1.6.4, I introduced the shaft power bus into RotaryCraft. And I'll be fully upfront about it, that thing sucks. It just doesn't work properly. It forgets what it's connected to. It doesn't connect to half the things half the time. And I don't really have the motivation to go and rewrite the thing. So at the time, I'm like, okay, screw this. I want, wires and motors and all that. So I designed ElectraCraft, and first few iterations didn't work very well. But eventually I got a system. It's like, okay, now I can actually take one engine, split it among, 12 machines, and have them all get the exact same power level. So I've got this whole bank of fans for a farm. Perfect. Got a whole bank of spawner controllers. Perfect. I don't know if you watched my old 1.6.4 world tutorials, but that's the world for which I created it.
Huh. So you basically, instead of, I guess, looking at the game or other mods and being like, hey, I think the game needs more mechanical stuff, you just looked at the real world and thought, hey, how do I implement that into Minecraft?
Or, hey, here's this feature I want and I don't have it, now I'm going to make it.
Yeah, it wasn't really, so I guess it's kind of more of that lends itself to the realistic, but also, I guess, very unique design of your mods.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a lot of integration with other mods. It's usually of hey, this would be fun, with the Aura node, EMP stuff.
Hmm.
Or, the, hey, I hate this one little part of this other mod. I'm going to go around it with this other thing, provided I don't get chewed up by the other developer. And certain mods, work very well for that. And, how to phrase, I, I like plugging different mods into each other for like where it makes sense at least. For
Hmm.
me, that's just kind of always been fun. Doesn't really do it justice. It feels very. It's very. It's very satisfying. I don't really have the words on hand to describe it as I feel it, unfortunately.
But I guess integrating your mods with other mods, is this more of like a recent phenomenon, or have you always kind of set out to do that?
Ever since I knew about the other mods, I've been doing that. Like the first major integration happened early in 1.5 when I became aware of the existence of a lot of these other mods. Like, okay, let me back up a bit. I mentioned earlier about how I was playing, Tekkit with Buildcraft. At the time, I knew of Tekkit or of Buildcraft, Red Power, IC2, and that might have been it. Oh, and EE. I had never heard of Thaumcraft. I had never heard of AE or Tinker's Contract. None of these mods had even crossed my mind. And then I ended up logging into a server. They claimed they were going to test my stuff. They lied about that. But that aside, they had all these other mods that I'd never seen before. Hey, what's this glowy cracked looking ore that glows in the dark? Or what's this digital thing you just dump items into and here they go, right? Or whatever. And so like, okay, so this is a mod called Thermostatic. This is a mod called, Tinker's Contract. And, I was like, okay. So I later, after leaving that server in disgust, created my own single player world. And I'm like, okay, I want to integrate all these mods together. So I added a whole bunch of, ore crossing to extractors, where I've got all those mod ore flakes and all that. That's where that comes from. I want, this thing to interact with this thing and this, okay. And it again, like everything else, it kind of grew organically to fit either my needs or just this would be fun, and the EMP and the Aura node fits in that latter category.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, one of the biggest aspects of a mod, I guess, is just integrating with other mods because, that's how often people play Minecraft. No one installs, say, like modular power suits or NEI and just says, "Oh, I'm done." Like, it's really, I guess, it's putting together multiple mods is the essential part of modded Minecraft. So I guess you kind of had that design philosophy.
Yeah, and I'll be one of the first to say that if you throw just ChromatiCraft or just RotaryCraft and its add-ons in a pack, you're going to have a fairly unpleasant time because there are areas in which they are weak. And for example, for RotaryCraft, item transport. Yes, it has the pneumatic item pump. That thing is bulky, it's kind of expensive, and it requires quite a bit of power. It's not all that flexible.
You're
And so
more
if you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just you mentioned Chromatic Craft, so I want to talk about. I guess that's your more one of your more recent mods, and that is kind of like a magic mod, but it's pretty unique and it's based on exploration, and as the name would imply, I guess colors. So where did that come from?
Okay, remember I mentioned earlier how I added all those crystals to Geostrata right back when I first created it.
Hmm.
Um, that was what Geostrata was for 1.5 and through most of 1.6. But later on, what ended up happening, well, two things. First is that I had this idea for a really pretty render, right? And I didn't really have a mod to stick it into, so I stuck it into Geostrata. And that's what became the Guardian Stone. Right? I'm like, okay, this is a magical thing, but okay, one magic thing in Geostrata, that okay, it's fine. I created dye trees around the same time because, I hated farming dyes the quote unquote real way, especially ink stacks from Minecraft. And
Hmm.
so okay, trees that spawn with dye leaves. Yes, it sounded like I was on an acid trip. And okay, sure. And then that kind of grew, and so dye trees got the rainbow tree, which was this massive glowy, not very clearly not natural tree, which later then got world stabilizing powers. ChromatiCraft, or not ChromatiCraft, Geostrata then got the tile accelerator, And I'm like, okay, we've got a bunch of magic stuff across 2 different mods now. And so what I did is I went to the community. I'm like, okay, these 2 mods are growing increasingly magical and increasingly similar because they're both based on the dye colors.
Right.
What about if for 1.7, I split all this magic stuff off into its own mod, at the time unnamed, and we've just got just the rocks. And Dye Trees, of course, ceases being its own thing, is now part of this other mod. And I'm going to throw in Ender Force for the hell of it, because Ender Force is too much work to maintain on its own. And the response was generally positive. And so I went through with that and started saying, okay, now we've got ChromatiCraft with all the colors. And okay, I then had to sit down and figure, okay, how's this thing going to work? And I went through a whole bunch of different ideas. One of the earliest ones was like an energy field, like field in the physics sense. Like, okay, at every point in space, there is some value, right, of energy. Right. You can tap this somehow. That's really hard to implement, and it's hard to show to the player, and it's not terribly interesting. It just sounds kind of bleh.
And I imagine it's a performance impact.
I don't mean performance, but that's probably true too. But it's more just like, telling this player, okay, here's this imaginary or invisible thing you can't directly detect in the powers of things. I mean, it just feels like a cop out.
It's weird, I guess, to some, yeah.
Yeah, and so I went through that and scrapped that. Went through a few other ideas, scrapped those because they were even worse. And then randomly, I had this idea: hey, what about cell towers, right? And repeater networks and all this sort of thing. I'm like, that's going to be interesting. And so I go and write what became the crystal network system with the pylons. They weren't really pylons one at the time, but repeaters, transmitters, that sort of thing. I went through several iterations designing the pylons. I'm like, okay, these things are going to be scattered around the world. That means you're going to have to go out and find them. This gives me a good opportunity. I can make the mod based on exploration rather than clicking around in a GUI like you do with most of the other magic mods, which I've never enjoyed. And it just kind of, again, started to grow organically. But it also, I think by happenstance again, it hit upon, I think, the perfect formula for the way to design the magic system of ChromatiCraft. And that is to say, I mentioned earlier, I'm not very good at being fully creative, right? Conjuring things out of thin air. But with ChromatiCraft, it kind of straddles the line between a magic and a tech mod. It's, in lore, it's sort of like, hey, these pylons, this energy is a natural force, right?
Right.
A force of nature. But it's also magic in the a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic sort of sense, right? Mm-hmm. And what that meant is I could apply some sort of consistency to it and not feel like I'm saying, okay, it is what it is because I say so, right? Which I never liked. And as a result, it made for a fairly unique styling. And I think it worked out really, really well on that.
Yeah, lots of, I guess, magic mods people have called tech mods, like Botania or stuff. Mechanically, they operate very similarly. So, is ChromatiCraft, you think of it more as actually a magic mod because of those aspects of exploration and kind of connecting things together?
It doesn't neatly fit into any category. I mean, you ask in the the general community, what is the difference between a magic mod and a tech mod? You're going to get a whole bunch of different answers. Some people will say that magic mods are defined by custom crafting systems. That's a pretty common sentiment. ChromatiCraft has that, but does that make Tech a magic mod? It has custom crafting systems. Other people say magic mods give you gear, armors and stuff like that, whereas tech mods give you blocks. But does that make Thaumcraft a tech mod? Because it has a whole bunch of blocks to do stuff. And other people will say, okay, no, magic mods have really pretty renderers. That's what defines them. Okay, so if I made a magic mod that was clear, I cast a spell, but it's all very ugly, it's not a magic mod? None of these rules are consistent, right?
Right.
And so, for me, I won't say the distinction is artificial, but I think it's more down to how the mod is conceptualized, if that makes any sense. And basically, if you're talking about this is a thing and this is how it works and it's explained, in sort of a technical way and it's in universe, it's understood, the player understands how it works, right? Mm-hmm. I.e. the player character is said to understand the mechanics. Then it's closer to the tech mod end of the spectrum. If it's more, hey, I have no idea what this might do. I might want to be careful, blah, 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 like you see in the Thaumonomicon or the Chromatic Craft Lexicon. Then it's more of a magic mod because it's more, experimental, I guess.
Yeah. Well, magic mods have typically been more, I guess, bleeding edge and trying out some features. And you saw, I guess, with I think Hexit was the really first big example of a mod pack trying to do this, where it defined magic or exploration mods as this kind of like adventure type thing. And so, do you think ChromatiCraft, I guess, is that adventure themed, or is that, I guess, more than you sitting around your base and making a bunch of things move or whatever?
Well, as I said, ChromatiCraft's exploration style came from just, I think, how I thought it would work out really, really well for the mod and be reasonably refreshing and unique compared to what is common among a lot of the mods. I will say that the styling of a mod is very, very distinct from its like core. How to say? From its core, this is a magic, this is a tech mod. You could have, an exploration-based tech mod if you wanted to. You could have a GUI-based, magic mod. It's you can have. It's not that one necessarily comes with or excludes the other, but the the reason that I went with ChromatiCraft being an exploration-based mod, aside from the fact, as I said, that the pylons kind of naturally led to that, is that Minecraft, by and large, like vanilla Minecraft, involves a lot of exploration, right? You're looking, for be it terrain or resources or whatever, right?
Right.
And for a lot of for a lot of people in mods, that stops being a thing. I've met a lot of people who say, "Hey, ChromatiCraft's a problem for me because once I build a house, I never set foot outside it again, ever." And to me, that's like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? And so to have a mod that encourages you to actually go out and do that again and find stuff, be it resources or whatever, it's I don't want to say it's going back to the roots or anything like that's soppy crap like that, but it's to me it's more fitting to the base game than it's like, hey, I'm going to live inside the house for a house for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's definitely understandable because, like, in lots of big kitchen sink packs or whatever, you'll get to a stage where, oh well, I have all these machines, I have this amazing base. Like, what point is there for me to explore and find new things? It's really not about discovery at that point. So I
Right, and it
guess
gets very boring very quickly.
yeah. So it's really neat that there's I guess mods like ChromatiCraft that still I guess have that kind of spirit, not to be corny, but like just that kind of motivation to actually set foot outside of your overpowered base and explore the world. But talking more generally, um, recently, I think a few months ago, you made the decision to move all of your mods over to, I guess, CurseForge as well as your website. So, I guess what's it been? Lots of mods have been using Curse now. So, what is, I guess, your opinion of this kind of trend of every mod being available on Curse?
Just point of clarity before I go on to that. I've been using my site from long before I went to Curse. I actually kind of half moved off the site to go to Curse. But anyway, to answer your question, I was not against Curse, but leery of it for a long time, largely because of what I had been told. I had been told that, hey, as soon as you put your stuff on Curse, we basically own it. And this hadn't come from the owners of Curse, but from others who were claiming to speak on their behalf.
Right.
And that means, all your licensing doesn't apply anymore. All your pack stuff doesn't apply anymore. And obviously, this was a prospect I wasn't going to tolerate. I wasn't about to say, hey, I put this on, Curse so that, like people can share it. And then someone else can say, okay, I can, because it's now on Curse, you don't own it anymore, and I can make derivatives or, monetize it or whatever. Not going to happen. I then talked with some people fairly high up in Curse, though. And they're like, yeah, this isn't actually true. Though, of course, you can't really enforce, hey, come to me for pack permission with Curse. Let's be honest, that's the way it is for anything. It's after the fact that I find out that some guys made a Tekkit launcher or multi-MC or whatever pack,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I don't find out beforehand. And he was very, very clear, one guy in particular was very clear, no, if you found out that someone is monetizing or claiming credit or whatever, right? Yes, you could have the pack taken down, just as I would the launcher. And at that point, I'm like, okay, there's nothing wrong with it compared to anything else. Around the same time, Mediafire decided to screw up really badly. I was using Mediafire beforehand, and basically anyone who was downloading on Firefox got a .jar.zip.
Ooh.
Which, of course, most people are on Windows and hide file extensions on. They just see .jar, but it's actually .zip, and of course, the file doesn't load properly and they crash.
Or
that got very irritating.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, screw this, and Curse it was, because Curse was convenient. And aside from a couple, I think, systemic and probably unfixable things, like, a file takes 3 hours to be approved sometimes, Curse has worked fairly well.
So putting your mods on, I guess, this repository has actually, you think, been beneficial, even if it means, I guess, giving up some of your ability to enforce your stance with mod packs.
Well, as I said, I'm not sure I gave up much at all. But it's been beneficial in the sense of it's just been more convenient to use for me to upload stuff, which, is good. It's the same way I was, quote unquote, secretly happy when I ditched AdFly. Yeah, I was making, 3 cents less per week, woo, 3 cents. But, it meant I had to put every, single link through AdFly, and then I get this, random garble text at the end, and I can't tell which link is which mod anymore, and half the time, like, hey, your RotaryCraft link actually points to Geostrata. Fuck.
Whoops.
And so I'd have to go and, fix that. I don't have to deal with that once I scrapped AdFly. Same thing with Curse. Now I know where everything is. I don't have to deal with MediaFire where I've got a whole bunch of other files sitting.
So, yeah, but I want to get back to, I guess with mod packs, lots of people recently have just been doing the approach of, hey, whatever, if you want to use in my pack, I don't care, don't ask me, don't bother me, I don't have the time. So I guess what motivates you to really, I guess, take a more stricter approach to that? Do you just want your mods to be, I guess, do you want to, I guess, approve the packs your mods are in?
This is a long story, but basically, the main thing is that, again, we're talking about the big progression-based mods. They're very, very sensitive in the sense that because of the way they're designed, which is differently than most other mods. Okay, let me back up. Most mods, right, like the overwhelming majority of mods, are like, hey, this thing is more expensive, costs more raw units of resource, right, whatever those resources might be. Therefore, it's later game, right? And, most pack devs, or almost all pack devs, probably all of them, players and everything else, they're familiar with that, right? And it's very easy to figure out how that works, and okay, I can tweak it to do whatever and whatever. But my progression-based mods don't work that way. They're like, you need this, and then you need this, and that makes this, and oh, don't forget about this thing, and oh, look, now you got to change this thing over to this. And it's a lot more intertwined. And though you can still, if you know what you're doing, tweak it and whatever, the thing is that you need to know what you're doing, right? And most people are not familiar with this sort of mod and don't know what they're doing, or they're like, no, I don't believe you that the mods are different. I got in an argument with somebody once over this, and then they break everything. And this actually started to happen a lot back in the early days of FTB Monster, back in 1.6. And this is actually why I put in all those rules. Like, okay, now you have to start coming to me. And at the time, like, no, you can't modify stuff because everyone who did so, well, almost everyone who did so did something really, really dumb. Like, hey, extractor's overpowered, no more extractor. Oh, look, everything after extractor, which is like 75% of RotaryCraft, gone. And, that just kind of carried on for a while. Later on, of course, other people start doing other things like trying to sell stuff, or hey, I helped make RotaryCraft, and if you tell me stuff, I'll promise to add all these features. No, you didn't. And so I want to say I got possessive because of the connotations associated with the word, but I basically realized that I'm not going to say that everyone's bad or everyone's stupid or anything like that, but there's a lot of people who really are. And, to me, it was perfectly acceptable to say, okay, the people who aren't, you've got this little extra hoop to go through, and it's not really much of a hoop. Come to me and say, hey, I'm not going to be an idiot, effectively. Just to make sure that the ones who are idiots, or, hostile, are not going to cause me a headache. And because that's just kind of how I think, right? To me, it isn't in any way unreasonable to say, hey, it's perfectly okay to cause a small convenience to everyone, save a large inconvenience to, a smaller minority. Most people didn't take that way, on the other hand, and that's that I'm sure you've heard about. People like, no, if you say we can't do this, I never had any plans to do this, but you're accusing me of implicitly of doing it anyway, and yeah.
Well, licensing gets tricky, but I guess you're really insistent on, I guess, keeping your vision. And if a pack is like, I guess, blatantly or doing something that I guess you view as against your vision, then that's what motivates you to, I guess, regulate that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a sentiment that I think probably many others have expressed as well. It's like once you put this kind of effort and this kind of work into something like this, right, a major mod,
right,
you start to think, okay, this is I made this, right? This is all perfect. It's my vision, whatever. And then some guy comes and screws it all up because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing in 5 minutes, right? It's hard not to feel like an artist who's just spent a week on a painting, and then some guy pisses on it because he thinks it's a piece of toilet paper. And you would not understandably want to yell at him, to put it lightly. But yeah, it's yeah, people will then see that and like, okay, you're being possessive, you're being, controlling, whatever. There's a whole slew of adjectives, some of which I learned from this, none of them flattering, that people will use. But yeah, it really does come down to the fact it's as soppy as this might sound. In a way, it is actually physically painful to see someone really horribly break something that you put a lot into working, making sure it works perfectly, right?
Hmm.
This is going to sound irrelevant, but a few days ago, I came across a big letter. Some cartoonist, makes comics for newspapers and whatnot, right? He wasn't happy with people sharing his comics or whatever around on the internet because, he wasn't, getting the exposure because people, crop out the watermarks and everything.
Right.
Right. And he used, I don't know the exact wording, but like he likened watching it, he likened it to watching, your kids go out, right? And then getting a phone call like, hey, you're not going to like what I'm about to say, right? I'm not a parent, and hopefully that never changes. But I can easily imagine, the dread that sort of thing would create.
Yeah, I mean, as a creator, you have this, I guess, you do have pride in what you do, and some people are like that differently. Some people don't care and are just like, oh, whatever, throw it in the pack, which is, I mean, a really cool practice. But at the same time, it's also, I guess, important for you that you keep your mods, I guess, kind of as you intend them to be used.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is that around the same time RotaryCraft started getting popular, the idea that any pack worth its weight had to heavily modify everything, right? Like I don't know if I said that correctly. Basically, around the again mid early 1.6 ish, a lot of packs that came out that were heavily tweaked for their own specific purposes, like agrarian skies and all that, right? And then there it made sense because there was a very specific purpose for which the pack was made.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, I think, didn't understand that. It's like, oh look, heavy tweaking, that's the way of the future, right? And several people would even openly say as much. And then they started to get the idea that if you just put a bunch of mods together and make sure they work and don't compete and whatnot, it wasn't really a pack anymore. The kitchen sinks, the term has become somewhat derogatory now, which it's a category. If once a category becomes derogatory, something's gone very, very wrong.
Right. Well, I think it's more, I think, I guess, of a saturation issue because everyone and their brother thinks, hey, I like all these mods, let's put them all together. And some people tweak that a lot, some people don't. But people that was, I guess, kind of, especially in that day, really, the world was really saturated with lots of packs of that vein.
Yeah, but I have nothing against tweaking, right? Hell, I did a lot of that on my dev server. It's just that the tweaking has to be there, A, for a purpose, and B, it has to make some sort of sense, right? At least in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
If you start tweaking stuff because tweaking, right, you end up with a bunch of garbage that, if you're lucky, it's still playable, and if you're not, enjoy. Nobody's going to actually enjoy it. On top of that, you get a bunch of stuff that just doesn't feel right, and this sounds very wishy-washy, but for example, if someone's like, hey, this is actually a real example a long time ago, by the way. To make shafts for RotaryCraft, I want you to have to use Silverwood wand cores from Thaumcraft. I'm like, okay, I understand that the thing is rod-shaped, right?
Mm-hmm.
But thematically, does that make any sense whatsoever, right? RotaryCraft completely abhors, or that's not the right word, completely ignores the existence of magic, right? As far as RotaryCraft is concerned, magic is not a thing, just like in the real world, magic is not a thing.
Right.
And so as far as RotaryCraft is concerned, a Silverwood shaft is a big stick of wood, right? That's going to do as well as an ordinary stick from an oak tree. That's going to snap like a twig, right? But of course, they don't want that, right? They want it to be, because a Silverwood is magic, and you've got this fundamental and completely irreconcilable difference in how these two mods are designed to work if you try to integrate them in that specific way. And go ahead.
Well, everyone has their own unique sense of balance, and for some people that means, I mean, maybe if they like to, for whatever reason they tweak, they just think, hey, I want to fit this with that, and maybe if I put Thaumcraft stuff in it, then that will encourage players to look at that mod, I guess, but they don't really consider the cohesion of that respective mod they're using.
Well, that's the thing, right? And hit upon something. And that's exactly what I did with our dev server pack. I've integrated a lot of stuff, including my own mods. Right, I've put Botania items and Photography items and mix them all around into my recipes and my stuff into their recipes, and it makes sense, right? Because it's all like I made sure, to at least as far as I can understand them, make some level of hey, this actually makes sense here, right?
Hmm.
I don't, however, take a singularity from AE and stick it in the recipe for an item fabricator from ChromatiCraft, because that just doesn't make sense anymore, right? Or a mana pearl from Botania. I'm going to put it in. I'm gonna make it a requirement for silicon in RotaryCraft. These things just don't make sense. Yes, you've integrated mods, but you've integrated them the same way. If you take a whole bunch of buckets of paint, pour them all together, you get a big puddle of brown. Yeah, you integrated your paint, but look what you came up with. It looks like shit, literally.
Yeah, I mean, integrating for the sake of integrating is never good, but I mean, every good thing has its limits. Too much mind tweaking, and you find yourself with something that's confusing and not very fun. But I want to move on to, I guess, another general thing. With
Hmm?
one Forge coming out for 194 recently, and I guess that being the direction modders are going in, how goes, I guess, work on, do you plan to port your mods to the newer versions?
Well, eventually I'm going to have to. I'm going to put that off as long as I reasonably can. Um, I am very much not sold on the benefits that people claim 1.9 brings to the base game. Just the same way that all those magical performance improvements from 1.8 magically disappeared the instant it was there were real releases opposed to the snapshots. But more importantly, Mojang thoroughly screwed it up under the hood, right? To avoid getting too technical, they rewrote every single function, or at least as far as I hear, every single function that takes an XYZ position, right? That's hundreds of thousands of lines of busy work, just replacing, individual XYZ with the object that contains XYZ.
Hmm.
That's a waste of time. I don't want to deal with that. In fact, I've got plans to avoid that by changing the base game back. And I know it'll work, just I want to put it off as long as I can. The point is, though, is that I don't think, contrary to what several others have said, 1.7 is dead or even dying. Yes, some people are starting to move on, but by and large, most players aren't unless they're specifically looking for a 1.8.1.9 mod. On top of that, a lot of major mods, some of which I don't believe for a second the community is going to tolerate going without. I'm not going to name names, but are not going to update, at least in the near future. Right?
Hmm.
And so I don't think I'm going to be forced in the near future either. And generally, historically, I've been one of the later ones to update, partially because, it depends on whenever I, have time, and partially because I don't want to kill my existing worlds, which of course won't ever survive a Minecraft version update, and partially because for months after every Minecraft version update, every single function, everything gets renamed to, func underscore some random number here, field underscore some random number here. And it takes months for all that to entity health or whatever. I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to wait until everything's settled down before I go and, try to figure out, okay, what the hell is all this arcane crap now?
Yeah, there has to be this, I guess, critical mass of mods for most, I guess, modded players to want to update. But from a technical perspective, it's interesting what you said, because I've had some other modders on here come and say, I think everyone universally agrees that it's a huge pain to have to rewrite a large part of their mod. But some people are saying if you want to take mods in a new direction, and one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of new mods with 1.8 and 1.9 is it's better to work with from the beginning, so you're seeing a lot of new style mods. So do you think you're gonna have any inspiration or any new ideas as the new versions gain popularity?
Well, you've basically asked me whether I can predict the future, but I don't have any explicit plans. Hey, I'm going to do this. I mean, I might say, hey, worlds are going to die anyway, so I might rewrite some registries internally, clean some stuff up. But that doesn't present itself on the front end, so the players don't really care about that. I'm not going to do anything, like I said, I don't have any explicit plans to do anything like I did with 1.6 to 1.7 Geostrata and whatnot, becoming ChromatiCraft. I plan on a direct port, or at least as much as is possible, which I hope is complete.
So I guess your plan is to, at least for now, just to eventually port when you absolutely have to, and I guess deal with it as it comes.
Yeah. The To me, A major Minecraft version update is really nothing of significance if it weren't for the fact of all the rewriting you'd have to do. The amount of content Mojang changes, from version to version is minimal, right? Like less than what you see in most mods, especially the big mods. And is for most mods' purposes generally, you can ignore it. It's just that every single time, the systems internally just change back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and the bigger your mod gets, the more you start to suffer because, oh look, they changed this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing, and enjoy rewriting all your resource handling or something.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. People say each new version, like, oh, this is going to be the one where Mojang fixes a lot of stuff, and sometimes they make stuff better, but lots of people complain how they basically screw things over for modders by changing lots of parts of the game. It looks like with stuff like 1.10, maybe they're going on a more frequent update schedule, because with 1.8 and 1.9 especially, they took this very long approach that when the updates finally did hit, they were such huge technical shifts under the hood that it was really a huge pain for lots of modders to update.
I don't think rapid firing the updates is going to help matters much.
Yeah, but do you think, I guess, the under the hood changes are mostly established at this point?
Well, again, I can't predict the future, but knowing Mojang, no, they'll probably find another thing that they decide to break. By the way, I just want to say, because it's relevant, the idea that, it takes a major shake-up like microversion number changes and, all these mods, taking a while to update, that it takes this for innovation to happen again and for new mod ideas to be taken, that's garbage. None of that is true. It tends to happen because, a lot of people are trying to fill a void of, a mod not yet being updated or not being updated at all.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing inherently required about that. You can have lots of innovation in the middle of a main Minecraft version, and if anyone argues otherwise, I can point them to a whole bunch of different mods that got invented in the middle of a main Minecraft version. So that, to me, that there isn't really any inherent benefit, unless you can point to a concrete technical one, to ever updating across a Minecraft version.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, we're in 1.7, it's a barren wasteland, there's no content for it. I mean, there's plenty of mods on everything that people can play with. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on today, and do you have any, I guess, closing thoughts?
I don't deal well with open-ended questions.
Well, just, I guess, any plans for the future in terms of like features for your mods, or just any kind of specific stuff you're working on?
Well, I mean, most of the development now, right, in terms of new content, at least, is ChromatiCraft, right? I guess, sure. I've got 3, maybe 4 new puzzles planned for the ChromatiCraft dimension. They're in various stages of implementation. One I'm hoping to have ready for V14. No promises on that, but I'm hoping. There's, of course, the 6th dimension track coming. That's hopefully going to be out in the next few days. I can't really predict what content might get added. I mean, it's all based on, ideas that end up happening or suggestions or whatever.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I look forward to seeing that. I'm sure lots of people watching this look forward to seeing that. And thank you, all of you, for watching, for sticking around. And thank you so much for coming on to be interviewed. And I guess, goodbye, all you watchers, and thank you.